Perfect. Hello, everyone. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to this hands-on workshop, March 2026. My name is Saurav. I work at IBM as Developer Relations Engineer. Basically, taking care of all the things, community things around Presto Foundation. Welcome to this session. So we are starting off this series, hands-on workshop series for all the folks around data community, data fraternity, anyone who is into data analytics, data engineering, working around big data. So I hope this series that we are starting off from today will help a lot. A big welcome to all the people who joined us from anywhere in the world. So yeah, we will quickly, I'll just introduce few things and then I think we will start it off. So yeah, so first of all, those who are new to Presto ecosystem, Presto Foundation, or those who are starting off with the big data analytics or the data engineering ecosystem, I urge everyone to be the part of the community. We have a very vibrant community, people, experienced folks around, experienced engineers around from big enterprises, right? So please scan this QR, be the part of our Slack community, open source community. There are some very big, very awesome people from across enterprises, right? So if you are exploring that what Presto is, even from very basic thing, so please be the part of community. We have a lot of experienced folk around that. Those people can guide you as well. So yeah, I'll just wait off 10 seconds if anyone recently joined us, right? So I'll not just rush it off. So yeah, so anything, even you are a open source contributor, if you are a Java programmer, C++ programmer, very active in open source community. So I would urge you to join the Slack community as well to get your PR pushed, right, to very quickly and get it done. So yeah, so also if you are around these cities, if you live in these cities, please join our local meetup group. So we do a lot of events in person, virtual, online. We do a lot of meetups as well. So you will get notification on meetup group as well as on the Slack channel as well. So that's why I urge everyone to join the Slack community and be the part of Presto meetup groups as well, local meetup groups. So yeah, I'll not take much time. So today we have Kirsten Stokes. A big round of applause for her. So she's very much open source, into open source. She's very active into open source community. She's open source developer at IBM, and I think she's part of Presto community from very long time, right? Very, and she's very active. So big thank you to her for taking this initiative and taking the workshop. So she will taking care of from this onwards. Over to you, Kirsten. Thank you so much, and over to you.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah. Oh, let me share my screen while I start my spiel about myself. Goody, all these windows. So yeah, like Saurabh said, I am a member of the Presto community. I think for the last 3 years, something like 3 years at this point. But time has flown by. But I do work on some other open source projects as well. And one of the things that I focus on is kind of exactly what we're going to be doing today, which is just a 101 on, like, from the ground up, just not only building Presto, but I'll also go through, a slide's worth of how you clone it, why we use forking in open source, things like that. So I will, to start, the chat's not super easy for me to get to, so please feel free to, unmute if you have questions. You're welcome to interrupt me. But actually, I don't have the link handy. Saurabh, would you mind sending the link to that blog post that you wrote that kind of contains most of the content we'll go over?
Sure, absolutely.
Thank you. Yeah, so I wrote this awesome blog that will go over most of what we're covering today. We have a little extra content for today, but if you can't follow along in real time, that is totally fine, because, you know, if you're going to be trying to build in real time as we go through this, hiccups happen. You know, Presto is a very complicated project, so it's not unusual that maybe the steps don't work immediately for you out of the box, unfortunately. But yeah, it's a pretty big project, so also totally normal. Another good reason to join the Slack, because, you know, if you, hopefully you'll continue to, you know, try out your build, and if you're troubleshooting that, definitely go to Slack, you know, let us know what kind of problems you're having. You'll see me in there. And in fact, I might be the one to help you out. So this is our agenda. We'll go through kind of, you know, your system setup and requirements. Then we'll attempt to build Presto from source, use specifically the Java Presto worker, which is for now the default, although that will be changing fairly soon. We'll also cover the IDE setup that you need to have going, just kind of removing as many variables as possible to get things going fast. And then we'll also we'll run Presto, connect with the client so that you can sort of make queries against the server, as is what you usually do in Presto. And then, time permitting, we can start the process potentially to build the C++ worker. And that is even more complicated, I guess I would say, than the Java worker. It's a huge project, but so that's why I chose Docker to kind of, again, like minimize our variables that we have to troubleshoot through. But that being said, it takes forever to build these Docker images, so we probably won't get through that part today. But again, keep working on it on your own time and come to the Slack, and I'll be happy to, you know, follow up there with any questions. Okay, so getting right into it. And also, I will say, I may go off camera intermittently here or there. Don't be alarmed. I'm still here. But yeah, if you see my camera disappear, that's by design. My bandwidth is not very great. Unfortunately, I live in the middle of nowhere in Mississippi, so we do what we can. All right, kicking off. So these are kind of our basic prerequisites. Definitely recommend Mac or Linux for your operating system. That's what most, you know, Presto developers are using. You can use Windows via WSL2. I am certainly not as familiar with that process, so if there are any questions related to that, I might have to ask you to go to the Slack, but definitely Mac and Linux, tried and tested on those platforms. You'll want Git. Git comes usually with any Mac or Linux distribution, so you should be fine there. As far as RAM and disk space, again, Presto is a pretty big project, so these requirements are kind of on the high end, depending, I mean, that's all relative, right? Like maybe not, if you have other open source experience, this could be very small. But I know when I first joined Presto, this was a pretty large project. And then for your IDE, we definitely recommend IntelliJ IDEA. The community version is fine. That's what I use. But yeah, the setup is much easier with IntelliJ than, for example, VS Code, just because IntelliJ is Java first and it makes it quite simple. So yeah, if you are trying to follow along, go ahead and install IntelliJ IDEA now. It doesn't take very long. It's fairly easy to get started. I think this is a link here, but it's easy enough to just Google and install the community edition. All right. Okay. Some more prerequisites. I'll start on the right-hand side, which is kind of unusual, but again, plug for the Presto Slack community for any follow-up questions. But you also need a GitHub account, pretty standard and open source. Obviously, everything we do goes through GitHub, so hopefully you already have that set up. And then as far as anything else you might need to know, nothing is strictly required, but some things will certainly help, especially if you run into any issues. But we will be using the command line for many things in the build process. So familiarity there would be good. Same with Git and version control. As far as the last two, Maven and SQL and distributed systems knowledge, those are definitely optional. But specifically the Maven knowledge can certainly help. I myself don't even have that great of a knowledge of Maven. It's a very comprehensive build tool. But yeah, we'll do the basics here that should at least get you off the ground and running. Okay, so first things first, you'll want to configure Git. Again, since Presto is an open source project, pretty much everything important that happens will be going through Git. And this may not be necessary, if you're already an open source contributor, you probably won't need to do these steps. But if you, haven't really used your GitHub account for anything super important yet, or if you specifically want to reset your Git name and Git email in order to, to make the email match the correct email that you want your open source contributions to be tied to, then you would run these git config commands. So obviously replace in the parentheses, not the parentheses, the quotations here, your name and your email as needed. But if you already know that, your name and email are set up appropriately, or again, you don't really care which email is tied to your Git contributions, then this is an easy one to skip. All right. So here's our first big step. I would like to, maybe I could, it'd be really nice if I could copy these links directly and put them into the chat for everyone. I guess I could exit out of my presentation and do so. But I'll speak about it first. You will need Java 17, either the OpenJDK version or Oracle JDK. So this is a relatively new development. We used to be working off of Java 8 with Presto, but recently 17 became the minimum requirement. So if you don't have Java 17, you may need to install it. The link here, I believe, goes to a Zulu installation of Java 17. And then, here, let me copy this. Oh, of course they don't make this easy. All right. Copied, pasted. Plus should work too. Now that I have the chat open, I see your question. No guarantees. It's kind of just one of those things where it may work, especially depending on the rest of your system. But 17 is, I would say, the recommended version. It's worth a shot though, if you already have, a higher version installed. But yeah, it's kind of hit or miss. So once you install, if you haven't already, Java 17, you will want to set your Java home variable, either, depending on what bash terminal or Z shell terminal that you use on your system, you can update this variable, export it in your, shell config. on Mac, for example, this path is going to look something like this. Yeah, you just want to make sure you have it set appropriately to the Java 17 version, so that everything works as expected. And then you can check it with this easy Java version command. There can be some difficulty. I had this myself when I upgraded. I think I was on Java 11, upgraded to 17 a few months ago. And, there's some troubleshooting I had to do, just put it that way, to get everything working again on the new Java version. So that's to be expected. If you've previously been on a different version, you might run into some trouble. Hopefully, though, that we can, work our way through that. All right, so while that's going, we can also discuss how and why we fork and Presto. So how is fairly straightforward. If you go to the Presto GitHub repository, there will be, as you can see here, a button up here. It says fork, and this is the logo for forking. So you will click that, and it will prompt you to create your own fork of Presto. Usually when I do this, I just keep everything the same. It'll auto-populate in the same name for the repo and things like that. I usually just keep all that the same unless I'm very sure that I want to make any changes there. And that's forking. That's pretty much, you've done it. Once you click that button and then, follow through the next page of the GitHub prompt, you're done. So why do we fork, though? Because it does seem, at first to be maybe a little bit more trouble than it's worth. Like, why do I have to go through this whole process? I mean, the easiest answer to that is just that that's the accepted way in open source. If you're just contributing to open source, like a specific project, and you're not maybe using it yourself, you probably won't make changes to your own fork unless you are specifically creating a pull request. But, in the grander scheme of things, a company or some entity could, create their fork and have it diverge, from the original in certain ways. That's obviously allowed in open source and encouraged to a degree. But yeah, forking, again, it's just a safeguard. If there's one, it prevents a single entity from, kind of taking over control of a single project. It prevents the project from being abandoned completely if one of the forks or if the original goes stagnant, things like that. But yeah, overall, the simplest answer is it's just the way we do it in open source, and it's kind of the easiest way to set up that pull request flow. So once we've forked our own fork of the repo, we want to clone it locally. So, this is likely something you're already familiar with, the cloning process. So, but if you're not, just change into on your local machine in a terminal, change into whatever directory you would prefer to clone Presto into. Most people have like a location where they keep all of their Git project clones. So change into that. And then all you do is issue a git clone command. But again, make sure you change this portion here, your GitHub username, to your actual GitHub username, of course. So you're cloning your fork rather than the main upstream Presto. And then you just change into all the commands will run from this point forward are going to be from our cloned directory. So just change into that Presto directory and you'll be where you need to be. So the first step here on this next page, next slide, is optional. Of course, you should already probably be in this Presto directory. So no need to do that if you're following along. Do see, okay, we're good. But if you're already there, this is the moment of truth. I'm not sure how many people are following along. So if you are, feel free to, give a thumbs up or put it in your respective chat. But this is where things get really exciting because we're actually going to issue the build from source command. So this is it right here. Again, from that main Presto directory, you'll issue this command. And just to break down what each of these pieces are, the first is invokes the Maven wrapper. So rather than like a local Maven installation doing the work for us, Presto has a Maven wrapper located in the root directory /maven w. And it's essentially just a way to make it easier for us to build and reduce again, we're kind of reducing the number of things that could go wrong by using a wrapper instead of your own local Maven installation. Because this wrapper, it's the same version for everyone that's building Presto. It has the same commands and all of that type of thing. So we're invoking that. We're telling it to clean everything first. If there's ever been a previous build, we'd like that to be disregarded and kind of start from scratch. The install kind of does what you would expect. That's what's actually going to compile the code, package it, and get all the dependencies going. And then we are skipping the tests in this command. So this is again for time. This command, the build itself, can take a lot of time, even when you're skipping the tests. Again, it's a pretty large project, lots of packages, as you'll see, and it can take quite a bit. So, if you're making a quick change and rebuilding, I'll usually skip the tests. But that being said, you will want to run the build without skipping the tests at least once before you submit a pull request, because obviously we're going to want all the tests to pass on that pull request. So it's just a best practice, before opening that PR to make sure all the tests are passing. But yeah, for our purposes, not necessary. Or you can save that step for last if you just want to make all your changes and then figure out the test as the very last step. It's up to you, of course. But yeah, if you don't want to skip the tests, just don't add that element in and they'll automatically run. All right. So I do have a troubleshooting page here. So again, I'm not sure. Let me check the chat. Anyone is? Of course, my chat is not coming up. So I don't know what's going on there. All right. Guess I won't be checking the chat. Anyway, so unmute yourself perhaps. Or 𝗀𝗏, you can speak on behalf of anyone that doesn't want to unmute themselves if there are chat messages. But if you're following along, again, I'll say it's not uncommon for something to go wrong. So if you're following these steps and you're like, I follow them to the T and I don't understand why I'm getting an error. Very common. First time I tried to set up Presto years ago when I joined, it took probably days for me to figure out what was going on with, just like my system settings and all that. So very common. I will say Also that, Presto, very large project, PRs are being merged certainly every day, every hour, potentially. So any given PR can, in theory, break something with the build. Again, not uncommon. So I know the docs are one of them recently that have been kind of flaky in the build. So you can add, so this is that same command, just with an added argument here. Ooh, where, this is essentially saying, don't compile the Presto docs module, which, is fine for our purposes. If you're not, making a docs change in whatever PR you will in the future submit, then you don't need the Presto docs module. You can eliminate that from the build. And you can do a similar thing with any module that is erroring, as long as you are very certain that you don't need that module in whatever change you're making. So that's, easier said than done to figure out if a certain module is necessary to whatever change you're making. There are a lot of, there's a lot of interconnectedness between the various Presto modules. But for example, if there's an error with the Presto Druid connector module, and you are not making a change related to Druid, then you can pretty safely, skip that module. So that is an option. Also, if you get any error at all, I really should have this on the slide here. I'll exit out and just add it. If you're getting any error at all, I'll make this a lot more clear for when we share the slides later. You can issue the same command as before, but you can include the -e and the $X arguments. This will just give you an error printout of exactly, and more logging information about exactly why your build is potentially failing. I mean, it's not foolproof. Sometimes it's still not super obvious what's going on when you get these errors, but it's at least a lot more detail than what you get by default. Sometimes the error that Maven gives you without these arguments is pretty clear. For example, sometimes it might just be a code formatting issue or something like that that's easy to fix, but sometimes it's not. So definitely use these as needed if you're having any trouble with that. Okay. It's really hit and miss as to whether I can get in this chat window. Yeah, that's a good question about how long on average it takes for the tests. I mean, that's going to depend on your system a lot. Oh, I see. Yes, and we already have some answers. So I was going to say like max 10 minutes for the build itself. If it's a lot more than that, but you have a kind of a slower system, then I wouldn't worry too much. But yeah, it shouldn't be taking just crazy long. But with the tests, I mean, yeah, that can be 30 minutes, maybe an hour, depending. Tests can also be kind of difficult because some of them you may not have, some of them do require some more setup, but you'll see, like, if you make a change to one module and it's going to test all the modules, you might get some failures there, but it's like you don't really have to worry about them because you know that change isn't from your change, essentially. So yeah, I won't go, well, whatever. I might as well go through this too. Yeah, if you've previously built Presto or another Java project with a different Java version, there are some things you can do if you're seeing some errors. So one of the things I had to do was check that the Maven wrapper was using the correct Java home. So I had to change it from the path to my Java 11 to the path to the Java 17 in the Maven also has a config file. So in both that config file, and then also just double check that your Java home is set correctly everywhere. And then again, always kind of a good idea to purge whatever you might have in your Maven local repository, just to start from a clean slate. So you can run this command, and you can also delete the directory where Maven artifacts are stored, which in most cases is this one given here. It might differ on your system, but yeah, if you have that directory, you can try deleting that and restarting. Okay. So again, that you might, if you are attempting the build now, you might not be done yet at this point, which is totally normal. So the next portion goes through specifically how to set up your IDE in order to have us, set up with a debug configuration that we can actually step through the code, if that's what you want to do, which is always recommended, I think. So again, we are using IntelliJ IDEA, so all of these configurations are highly specific to that IDE. It's certainly possible to use others, but the surefire way is definitely this. So there's a few things we have to change. One is the Maven configuration for the project. So I guess I'll say this first. What you'll have to do first is open IntelliJ on your system, and then you'll want to open specifically the Presto repository directory. That's probably pretty obvious, but just in case. So from there, you'll go to your settings. Then you'll have to find the build execution and deployment header, build tools subheader, and from there the Maven subheader. And there's a drop down here where use Maven wrapper is an option. You will select that. And the reason this isn't maybe strictly required, because as you've seen, we're running the Maven wrapper from the command line. But this is helpful because it still gives IntelliJ the same view, same Maven dependency-based view that is helpful for code completion and dependency graph understanding for the IDE. So even though we're not really issuing Maven commands from the IDE, it's still helpful to have it set up in this way. Then, so you can click apply to apply those changes, but don't exit out. From there, you expand this Maven subheader and go to the runner, and then go ahead and click this skip tests checkbox here, and then apply and OK. Okay. Then from there, you can exit out of that dialog box that is specifically for the IntelliJ settings. And then we will actually set up our project configuration itself. So we're going to set up a Presto server project. And we've got a file project structure project, and then make sure that the SDK value here is set to the one either that you just installed, if you did just install it, or whatever Java version 17 that you're running. Or if you'd like to try a higher version, you can of course select that here, but no promises. And yeah, this drop-down menu should automatically discover all of the Java SDK options on your local machine. So you should hopefully see the one that you're expecting to see in that dropdown. Next, go ahead and hit run, and then you'll see edit configurations. So we are adding a new application, and this will be the Presto server. So just for a quick heads up, I guess, we usually, the debug setup that you have the server running as an application, and then we will separately start a Presto client that can issue commands, and at which point the commands are issued to the running application in IntelliJ. And if you have breakpoints set, the breakpoints are hit, you can step through the code and things like that. So we're specifically kind of stepping through the server's brain in this case. So yeah, set the name. The name can be whatever you want. I think mine is just Presto, but Presto server is a little more clear. So whatever you would like to call it is fine. And that's really the last time you have any choice in what options you're setting here, because everything else is pretty important to have exactly right. So there's a modify options drop down here, expand that, and then you just want to make sure that everything with the checkbox in this screenshot here is checked. So most of these may already be checked, but definitely make sure that add VM options is checked as well. I think that's potentially the only one that won't be automatically checked. And then we'll set these three things first. Again, we want to set the Java SDK to the expected version. So this is the same version that we set in the previous step. We also set the class path to Presto main. So this, again, as you can see, is a dropdown here. Presto main should be one of these options in the dropdown. You'll see many, but go ahead and select Presto main for that. We'll skip down here to the main class. So this again has to be exactly as shown. You want to set that to com.facebook.presto.server.presto server. And then, excuse me, we also want to set the working directory to module directory, which is just the current directory from our main class path. So that's everything here, but we still do need to set the VM options. So as you can see in this previous slide, the VM options, it's just a single box lengthwise, but you'll want to expand that using these arrows and copy into that everything in here. So two notes on that. One, probably the easiest way to copy this is to go to the link to that blog post that I mentioned earlier that 𝗀𝗏 wrote. You can just copy, he has all of these listed there, and you can just copy that and paste it into your VM options. But I do want to specifically call out, as is done in the blog post as well, you do need to change this path. So, this is kind of a dummy path here, but whatever your complete absolute path is to this config.properties file is what you want to put. Now, that will automatically, like the Presto on portion of this won't change, but the part preceding Presto will just be whatever your current working directory is on the command line. So just make sure you change that, because we will get an error if we run it without that. All right. And that is everything you have to configure in 𝗱𝗁𝗀𝗃. You can click the apply button will be clickable if you haven't already applied your changes. So just go ahead and click that and then OK, and you're done. All right. So hopefully by the time that's all set up, your build may have potentially completed, hopefully without errors, if you're very lucky. And at that point, you're pretty much ready to run both the server and the client, as I mentioned. So to do so, again, just to reiterate, your build will have to be complete. And we'll also say, anytime you may, the way that this is set up, that we have this set up currently, anytime you make a change to the code that you want to test out, for example, you'll have to rebuild and restart the server. So can be a little tedious, but rebuilding is pretty easy if, because you're usually only making changes to maybe 1 or 2 modules. So it won't take nearly as long. Everything else will be, already cached. And we'll also say with the caveat that, you don't have to run the clean, you can remove the clean portion of that build command in that case, if you feel like you don't need it to be clean. Because if you include the clean portion, everything will start from scratch. So just a note there. But yeah, if your build is complete, you simply run your configuration that we set up earlier. So whatever the name is here that you applied to it, go ahead and run that. So I will say there are 2 buttons. There's a run and a debug button. The run button just runs the server. Of course, the debug allows you to debug. So if you do set any breakpoints in the code, and then you hit this play button to run only, you won't hit your breakpoints because you're not in debug mode. So if you do want to debug, definitely click the bug instead. But they do, to the naked eye, they, accomplish the same end, which is they start running your configuration. So you'll see in your 𝗱𝗁𝗀𝗃 terminal that pops up, the output screen. It's cut off in the screenshot for space, but a bunch of log messages will start that always start when you're setting up the Presto server, essentially just cataloging all of the connectors that we have connected and their properties, making sure everything is set up as expected. And eventually, when everything is finished, you'll see an all caps server started message at the very bottom of that output. And again, this can take, depending on your machine, a few minutes potentially. I think 30 seconds is probably a more reasonable length of time to expect if you have a reasonably good machine. You can also confirm that Presto is running by accessing your localhost port 8080 in a browser. So that will show you that, again, that everything is up and running. I think mine is up and running. We can check. It is. Hooray. So it'll look something like this. You won't have this portion down here because we haven't issued any queries yet, but I issued a query some days ago that did not go so well since it's in orange. So yeah, that is what mine looks like. All right. Next step. So once the server is up and running, all we really need to do is start up a client. And the client, we will run from the command line. So this is, I would say the typical way of running Presto commands, issuing them to your server. So to do so, you will, assuming you are in the Presto directory, the, root repository directory right now, go ahead and change into the Presto CLI/target directory. And target is where all of our built files are kept. So in this directory is an executable jar file that contains all of the code for the Presto CLI module. So essentially all we're doing in this next step here is running that executable, the CLI executable, and we do specify that the server is available on localhost 8080. And that's not strictly necessary in this case because port 8080 is the default for Presto, but always better to be safe with that. And if you have success there, no error messages, you will see the Presto prompt in your terminal indicating that you are successfully in the client at this point. And really that's it. Now you can run whatever commands you'd like to run. An easy one to test that everything's working is just issuing a show catalogs command that will show you a list of all the I'll say connectors for which there's a properties file in the expected directory. So you'll see a bunch of them. They aren't all functional, of course. They're kind of just dummy properties files and dummy catalogs, but you can issue commands against the TP-CDS and the TP-CH catalogs there, which are just the built-in catalogs, that include some benchmarking data. Okay, I guess that's really it as far as for building the Java worker. I don't know if anyone was able to successfully follow along. Here's a question. So I'm guessing, the question is if there's a command to replicate the same setup that we just went over in the IDE in the terminal. And there definitely is. It's very long, as you can imagine, because essentially if you are issuing the same command in the terminal, you're including all that same information, just passing it, to the terminal instead of the IDE. So I don't have it handy, but I can definitely figure out because, in fact, I believe that you can get that directly from, so if you don't have the IDE set up, you might not be able to get it yourself, Satej, but I think I could get the actual command that's running directly in the terminal. So I can get that to you. In fact, perhaps I have it in here. No, my log isn't long enough, but yeah, it's definitely possible to not, if you want to bypass the IDE completely, totally possible. Just requires a lot more knowledge, I guess, of, all the pieces and how they connect, which is good to have. Sometimes the IDE makes it a little too easy for us, but cool. All right. So what time is it? We have 30 more minutes. I definitely can stop for questions if we have more, because I will say with the C++ content, there's not a lot to go over. Specifically, again, because it would take far too long to do it in real time. So I'm essentially just going to give you the information. You can start running the commands, but they're going to take quite some time up to hours to build these Docker images. So yeah, we won't get completely through it. But yeah, I'll pause real quick for questions here about the Java portion of things.
I think we have one question, Kirsten. I don't know you have taken it or not, but is there a command to replicate the same setup as in ID in the terminal? Yeah.
Yes, I did. I did take that already. And I basically, for anyone that missed it, I don't have it handy, but it's definitely possible. And I can dig a little and find it if we wanted to take that to Slack or something.
Sure. So, Satyaj, I think we'll drop it in Slack channel, I think, Kirsten, right? And
Perfect.
hopefully
Yeah, that would
people.
be great.
Okay, Satyaj, if I want to contribute semester block, I want to understand your experience. Yeah, absolutely,
That is a
Satyaj.
great question.
This session we have kept it for contributors, experienced contributors as well, like you. So yeah, you can start with the same process as Kirsten is explaining already. So just pick the issue, any issue that you see on the GitHub, on Presto GitHub. So there are a lot of open issues on the architecture side, or basically the query optimization side, good first issues, and a lot of issues are there. So you just start you start with any issue and just submit a PR. And the good thing is that our maintainers are very active, very much active, and you will get feedback, or whatever your PR will be merged within, I think, very less time. I think our PR merge timing is very less, basically. Yeah.
Yeah, especially in the last year, it's really sped up the review
Yes.
process. So
Yes.
yeah, I would always recommend if you are new to Presto or any whatever open source project that you want to contribute to, going to the open issues. Usually most projects, if they're worth their salt, will have a good first issue or similar label that you can filter by. Similarly, the docs are another great place to start for any repo, even especially if you're like brand new to the pull request flow. Docs, I know it's not like the most glamorous thing in the world, but it's a really good way to get like the flow of how to actually make the change, submit the PR, get a feel for, the review process and stuff like that. And obviously you'll see here, like a lot of the good first issues are also docs issues. So I think we live by that philosophy here.
Yeah. Yesterday only I got my PR merged, so I think it's very quick. Yeah. So I think
Yes.
so Satyaj, if you are considering to contribute to Presto, please go for it. Yes. Yeah. So yeah.
And I'll
Okay.
also say this because, you'll see sometimes that someone is assigned to one of these issues. So if someone is already assigned, hold off on working on that unless there's if there's been no activity for like months, then you're probably good to go. But I will say you don't have to be assigned to start working on an issue. So, but if it's an issue where it might take quite a while for you to figure out what you're trying to do, you can, open the issue and ask it to be assigned to it. Usually someone will do so. But just know that like if it's something, like easy-ish, then you can tackle it like right away. Then you don't have to be assigned to it to open a PR for it. That's totally fine. In this repo, at least, it the etiquette differs in different repos, but I think that's the way. I would say that's the way most repos do it. You don't have to necessarily be assigned.
Yes, absolutely. And Satyaj, to answer your question, I have dropped the links of the future plan, the discussion. Yes, we absolutely have a complete future plan, and all the discussion happens on a monthly basis. So you can join that discussion. And yeah, absolutely. So you can be the part of it. Just join the Slack channel and you will get all the information there, and or officially on the website as well. So you will get all the information related to Presto on website and the Slack channel. So everything, yeah, the working groups and everything. Yeah.
And Presto does have a ton of documentation. So there's also this wiki, that has just a bunch of in-depth info about certain things, but the official docs as well have a bunch. So it can be a lot to get through, kind of overwhelming at times, but yeah, definitely check it out. Start there with questions, but also don't be afraid to ask in Slack too, because yeah, everyone in the Presto community is really nice. And that is not always the case with every open source project. So
And
take advantage of that.
Super active as well.
Yes,
yeah,
exactly.
So we have another question, Kirsten, from Satej, that there was a reference by Kirsten. I think you started with a reference to Java and how much of it's changing. Is it to C++ direction? If you could elaborate.
Yes, exactly. Yes, so that is a good question. Yeah, Presto obviously originally built with Java, but the Presto C++ worker has been also called Prestissimo. Occasionally has been really actively worked on a ton in the last 3 years. And I will say, I don't have an exact estimate, but the idea is that as soon as possible, the C++ worker will be the default and the Java worker will, slowly be used less and less. I mean, I think there's always going to be a place for the Java worker because some systems don't want to or can't, switch to the C++ worker. But the goal is for most setups to switch to the C++ worker. There is a caveat that, in the Java worker, as you saw, if you've built, if you've started your build command from source, just a ton of modules, and a lot of them are something like Presto/Druid, Presto/SQL Server, Presto, not slash, sorry, dash, Presto 𝗲𝗴𝗁𝗲𝗏. Those are connectors, so the code for specific connectors. And all of those modules will have to be re-implemented in C++ separately. So there is support currently for the 𝗲𝗴𝗏 connector and the 𝗲𝗴𝗏 connector in the C++ worker, which are also, overwhelmingly the popular connectors. So it makes sense that we're starting with those. But yeah, the goal is eventually one-to-one functionality with the Java worker. I don't know if anyone has an estimate as to when that full transition will take place, but C++ is the future. We'll just put it that way. Because again, with the C++ worker, you also can benefit from GPU acceleration, which is of course all the rage right now with no signs of slowing. You're eliminating a lot of the garbage collection and other overhead that Java sometimes oftentimes incurs. So yeah, it's the future. There's still plenty of things to be done in the Java worker as well. So it's not by any means like pointless to contribute to the Java worker or anything like that. But yeah, C++ is the future. But I will say also, again, it's been around for years, but it is still relatively new. So the development for it is not as built out. I think, a relatively small number of people are actually doing the development on the bulk of the C++ worker development. And it does require more, resources on your machine, GPUs potentially if you're testing that. So it's not quite as mature, obviously, as the Java development instructions. Let's see. Okay, yeah, I think we covered that. That is a really good question. We definitely have some documents, not as much as I'd like, because I also personally have not done any development with the C++ worker. And that's like one of the areas that I've wanted some more information on myself too. So I know there have been some blogs, some papers, I believe, not a ton, but there's a really good blog I know that I think 𝗲𝗏𝗲𝗏 wrote, that we can share the links to after this, because I think also the goal is to get a little bit more documentation going. It's one of those things where the core developers have been so busy doing the development that the documentation has perhaps lagged behind a bit, understandably. So yeah, I'd also love some good reading material on that front. So I'll see what I can collect. But the Presto blog is one good place there's 2 or 3 good articles there written by the developers themselves about, latest updates and things like that. So worth checking out there first, potentially. All right. Okay, still doing good time-wise. So I'll just take you through the content I have for the C++ worker setup. And then I believe we'll still have time at the end here if there are any additional questions. But definitely, full disclosure, not my area of expertise. I'll just put it that way. So we're learning together much of the time when it comes to the C++ worker. But that being said, don't hesitate to ask questions too, because this is something that I need to know more of myself. All right, so start again with some system prerequisites for the C++ worker. You need make installed. It's already installed if you are on a Mac or Linux machine, in all likelihood. So you don't have to worry too much there. And then, as mentioned, these particular instructions are using Docker. So you'll want to have Docker installed, of course. That being said, it is, of course, possible to build, let me skip down to here. It's possible to build this on your local machine as well. But again, you're going to be probably dealing with more variables potentially affecting your build negatively, and you're going to have very specific versions of things installed on your system. So, I give this here if this is the direction you want to go with it. You'll need all of this, and the instructions are at this relative path to the Presto repo. So certainly possible. But yeah, if you just want to get it up and going, I think Docker is often a good way to do that. So that's what I have chosen for this. So that being said, regardless of which way you choose, Docker or truly building on your bare metal, it's going to take a while. It's yeah, it's a lot of code, and the dependencies are also very hefty. So yeah, definitely takes quite a bit longer than the Java build. So don't be surprised by that. But the first step, regardless, is to change into the Presto native execution directory. I've not done a very good job of keeping these change directory commands consistent. You're likely already in the Presto directory. So if you are, remove that portion of the command, because this is just one subdirectory from the repo root. And then you'll do a make submodules command. So essentially that's just pulling in all the submodules that are needed in order for the C++ worker to function. 𝗲𝗂𝗀𝗃 is one of them, but there are many. So that can take a bit of time. Again, that's not unexpected. But once that's complete, we're going to build 2 Docker images. So the first is a dependency specific image that's kind of more slow moving. The second one is the runtime image, which is built on top of the dependency image. And the runtime image is where the runtime code is. And then any changes you might make to the code would be, built into the runtime image rather than the dependency image. So there's 2 options. You can either build, the dependency image using CentOS or Ubuntu. Doesn't really matter. I think CentOS is slightly less error prone potentially, because it's more commonly used. So I guess that's the one I would recommend. But to build the dependency image, you just issue this docker compose build command and specify CentOS native dependency. So in case it wasn't clear earlier, the dependency image is mostly just the dependencies. So again, like 𝗲𝗂𝗀𝗃, everything, packages that this code, that our Presto code will depend on, but that moves fairly slowly. So we don't want to have to rebuild it every time there's a change to the Presto code itself. So that's what this first command is building. The second command, which you can't issue until the first command completes, the first image is built, is obviously similar, but is to build the runtime image. So you can or cannot include, sorry, this is a little, let me just change that. This is a little too large. This portion is optional. You don't have to have the build type be debug. It is a little faster. If you want to include that, you might as well, but it's not strictly required. But the CentOS native runtime is the name of what we want to be building, or if you're using Ubuntu, you would just change this portion to the related Ubuntu command, which, if that's the route you want to go, you would have to go into your IDE here, into the Presto native execution, and you'll see in here the various names for all of these images. So you would just specify whichever one you would prefer. So yes, as mentioned, this takes a long time. I think I've made that point sufficiently by now, but yeah, I just don't want anyone to be confused. From here, we would do the same. Once your dependency image is built, you build your runtime image on top of that image, and you have your final image. From here, the setup looks similar to what we did for the Java worker. We will still use the Presto server run configuration that we set up earlier, because the coordinator is still Java-based and no plans on having it changed from being Java-based. But you do have to make slight modification to some of the properties files. I'll say you don't have to, but it can help for demonstration purposes to make these changes. So there's config properties file at this path relative to the repo root. You can add these two properties in there if you'd like. And basically what this is saying is, the first line here is saying we don't want the Presto server application that we're starting, we don't want it to do any work. We only want it to be a coordinator. So node scheduler is what schedules work on individual Presto nodes. So we're saying include coordinator as a worker, ? No. That's how I read that, at least. And then we do also want to include native execution enabled, true, and native. You'll see native a lot in these C++ worker commands. Native is just another term for the C++ execution. Okay, and then same as last time, you can click, your play button or the debug button to start up the Presto coordinator. Similarly, we have to make some changes also to the Presto worker config properties. So this Presto worker will be running as a separate node from within the Docker container. So it has a separate properties file that specifies what its properties are. So this is located at this path from the repo root. And you'll want to include some of these things that you see here will already be included, but some won't. So just go through, make sure it looks about one-to-one with this image here. And just for an overview of what these properties are saying, this is not a coordinator node. Of course, it can't be. So we're setting that to false. The discovery URI is where this worker will go to register itself as a worker with the coordinator. So we have to use this host Docker internal path, but port 8080. Some of these aren't, these are obviously memory settings. These can be tweaked, but this is what I recommend you start out with. Yeah, all of these things are more memory settings. As far as this one, this is just the port at which the C++ worker will run. And then finally, let me make sure. Yes, finally, we run the actual C++ worker. So this will start up an instance of the runtime image that was built in the previous slide. It is quite a long command. We have to include a lot of things, but we're specifying that we want to run it. We're giving it a name. We have to map the ports for both the worker and the coordinator. Specify that the network is the host network. And then we also map the /etc. directory, which includes those config.properties files, into this is just the location that any Presto node expects to find their properties files. And then yes, change this if you ran the Ubuntu commands, but it's CentOS 9 if you did CentOS. And then the client portion is also the exact same as the Java portion. So you'll just change into the client target directory, start the client with the same command, and then from there, everything you do is exactly the same as what would be done in the Java setup. The difference here, of course, is that your only worker that's available is the C++ worker. So just for clarity here, in this properties file where we changed to say we don't want to include the coordinator as a worker here, what that's essentially doing is forcing all the work that happens in the cluster to be done on the C++ worker. So you'll notice if you were to issue a show catalogs command, you're still going to see the entire list of catalogs that are available in the servers, etc. folder, excuse me. So that will include, again, the SQL Server connector, the MySQL connector, the MongoDB connector. All of those will be present, but they're not really accessible since you don't have a Java worker. You can only access the catalogs for which you have a connector in the for the C++ worker. So again, I would recommend the TPCS and TPCDH catalogs just for playing around with how things work. Those are available in the C++ worker. And again, the C++ worker does support the Hive and Iceberg connectors, but you actually have to have a Hive and an Iceberg setup running in order to properly test those. So starting with TPC connector is the easiest way to go about that. But yeah, just to reiterate, show catalogs, it's querying the coordinator's metadata, not the worker specific metadata. So you'll see, in fact, that's what I was testing here in this command that I ran. So I ran this setup with the C++ worker and no Java worker and said, okay, show me the schemas in the SQL Server catalog. And essentially it's saying, well, I can't do that because I'm a C++ worker. I don't have access or the ability to do anything with the SQL Server catalog. So yeah, queries will only succeed for the catalogs that the worker supports, not the coordinator. But if you want all of it to work, you want a Java worker and a C++ worker going at the same time, that's no problem. Just either remove this line or change the value here to true. And then you'll have both a Java and a C++ worker. Some other things I will mention as far as the development flow for this, every time you change the config properties file for your server, you have to restart the server. So the changes only go into effect when you restart, which can be a little annoying, but it only takes 30 seconds usually, so not the biggest deal ever. Similarly, if you're developing with the C++ worker, you're actually making changes to the Presto native execution code. If you're using this flow that I've set up here, you will have to rebuild only the runtime image every time you have a change you want to test. So again, kind of not super convenient, but works. There are other ways to do this, as you can imagine. Well, one, of course, is to just build on your local machine, as we mentioned. But Presto also does include a way to set up, I believe it's they're called dev containers. So the setup is quite involved. I actually couldn't get it working, full transparency, on my machine due to space limitations. But it's definitely worth a shot, and those instructions are also at this Presto native execution README. At which point, you'll see you can build it with Docker files, and then you follow that link And there are further instructions in this sub README as well. So it's definitely worth trying if this is the direction you want to go with your development, because with dev containers, you don't have to rebuild images or anything. Changes you make will automatically show up in your code, and you can step through it at will rather than rebuilding the whole image and going through that whole process. But yeah, I believe that is, yes, we already saw this slide, which is just the setup for if you do want to try building locally, definitely give it a shot. I, again, full disclosure, have not attempted this. I knew I wanted to go with the Docker approach for this specific session, just because, again, it eliminates a lot of things that could potentially be differing on all of our systems, but it's worth a shot. And if you have any issues as you're going through it, feel free to reach out in Slack. And I'll also say, since this is such a new, newer, relatively new worker that doesn't include maybe as robust documentation as Java, it's a great opportunity as you're going through the setup. If you find there's gaps, if you solved some problem that doesn't exist in the README, you know, you can add a troubleshooting section to one of those READMEs with the specific issue and how you fixed it. It's a great opportunity for contributions because it is in need of more robust information. I'll just put it that way. But yeah, that is all I have for this session. Before I open it up to questions, just again, please don't hesitate to reach out on Slack. We'll help you out there. It will probably be me. So if you'd like to request someone else, you're welcome to. But yeah, we'll learn together, especially with the C++ stuff. But yeah, thanks.
Thank you, 𝗀𝗻𝗃, for the awesome session. I think a lot of things are clear now. I think I think community people, all the members will now have a reference to go through, right? So
Yeah.
thank you so much, everyone who attended. I request everyone to join the Slack channel once again. I think because that's our go-to place for all the communication, everything, all the announcements and everything. So if you are not part of it till now, so join it. All the links, all the you will find it on the website, on the LinkedIn page, on the announcement, everywhere, right? Or you can DM Kirsten or me, anyone, right? So we are happy to help, right? So I think within next few weeks, we will come up with the new workshop, new topic, and I think we'll follow this series to help our community, our Presto community. So thank you so much once again, and just keep trying for the Presto, and just let us know if you stuck somewhere. Okay. Thank you everyone. Bye bye. Take care.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
Kirsten, once
Have a
again.
good one.